1986, the Indian Ocean. A Soviet T-95 Bear reconnaissance bomber is cruising at 40,000 feet, doing what it has done 100 times before, probing the edges of a U.S. carrier battle group, looking for weaknesses, testing response times. Then, two F-14 Tomcats appear on its wingtips. Not from below, not from behind, they were simply there, 160 feet off each wing, close enough for the Soviet crew to see the pilots' faces through the canopy, close enough to read the aircraft markings. The message was not transmitted on any radio frequency. It didn't need to be. That was the F-14 Tomcats' philosophy of war: presence, power, the knowledge that you had been seen, identified, and chosen, and that the only reason you were still flying was because someone decided to let you go. Now, contrast that with this. In 2019, an F-35 completed a combat mission over Syria. It flew into defended airspace, completed its objective, and returned to base. The Syrian Air Defense Network, one of the most sophisticated in the Middle East, never registered a contact, never fired a missile, never knew it was there. Two aircraft, two wars, two completely opposite answers to the same question. How do you survive in the sky when someone is trying to kill you? One said, be so powerful they're afraid to try. The other said, be so invisible they never get the chance. This is a story of what changed between those two answers, and why the aircraft we lost in the process may have taken something with it that we can never replace. To understand the F-14, you have to understand the world it was built for. It was 1969. The Cold War was at its most dangerous. Soviet doctrine called for saturation attacks on U.S. carrier battle groups, waves of bombers, each carrying multiple anti-ship missiles launched from beyond visual range before American fighters could intercept them. The math was brutal. A carrier battle group had minutes, sometimes seconds, to respond before the missiles were in the air, and once the missiles were in the air, the carrier was already dead. The Navy needed something that could kill the bombers before they reached launch range, something that could track multiple targets simultaneously, fire at extreme distances, and do it fast enough to stop a coordinated wave attack. What they built was less a fighter than a flying weapon system. The F-14 Tomcat carried the AIM-54 Phoenix missile, a weapon so advanced it remains classified in parts of its design to this day. The Phoenix could engage targets 100 miles away. 100 miles. At that range, the target pilot would have no warning, no time to react, no meaningful chance of survival. The F-14 could track 24 targets simultaneously and engage 6 of them at once. But here's what the specifications don't tell you. The F-14 needed 2 people to do this: a pilot and a radar intercept officer, an RIO, sitting behind him, managing the weapon systems, tracking the targets, coordinating the engagement. 2 human minds working together at the limits of human performance. That requirement, 2 crew members, tells you everything about what the F-14 was. It was so complex, so demanding, so capable that it exceeded what one human being could manage alone. The variable sweep wings, which could move from a narrow 20-degree angle for high-speed flight to a wide 68-degree spread for slow carrier approaches, were controlled automatically by a system that read airspeed and adjusted in real time. But the pilot still felt every change, still felt the aircraft breathing beneath him. Former F-14 pilots describe it the same way, again and again. It was alive. Not metaphorically, not poetically, in the way that matters to a pilot. It had personality, it had moods, it had a feel that no simulator could replicate and no manual could describe. It was the kind of aircraft that pilots fell in love with, that they grieved when it was gone. And in the sky, it projected something that no stealth aircraft can project: fear. When a Soviet crew saw 2 Tomcats appear on their wingtips at 500 miles per hour, they felt something that no radar system can quantify: the physical presence of an aircraft that had been designed to hunt them specifically, that carried weapons specifically designed for targets exactly like them, that could kill them before they knew they were being targeted. That feeling changed behavior. That feeling prevented escalation. That feeling kept the Cold War cold at 40,000 feet over the Indian Ocean for 30 years. The F-35 Lightning II was not designed to be loved. It was designed to survive. The philosophy that produced it starts from a different premise than the F-14. By the late 1990s, the threat had changed. It was no longer Soviet bombers in coordinated waves. It was surface-to-air missile systems, increasingly sophisticated, increasingly integrated, increasingly capable of killing fourth-generation fighters before they could complete their missions. The F-16s and F-18s that replaced the Tomcat were fast, agile, lethal in a dogfight. They were also visible, and visible in the modern battle space means vulnerable. The F-35's answer was to disappear. Its airframe is shaped around a single engineering principle. Every surface must deflect radar energy away from the receiver, not absorb it, deflect it. The angles are calculated to the millimeter. The skin is coated in radar-absorbing materials that require maintenance so precise that a single panel installed incorrectly can compromise the entire aircraft's stealth signature. From the front, the F-35 has a radar cross-section roughly equivalent to a metal golf ball. A golf ball. That same F-14 that could track 24 targets at 100 miles would struggle to find an F-35 at 15. But the F-35's real revolution isn't its stealth. It's its brain. The F-35 fuses data from its own sensors, from other aircraft, from ground stations, from satellites, and presents the pilot with a single, unified, interpreted picture of the battlespace. The pilot doesn't see raw radar returns. They see a processed reality. Threats categorized, priorities assigned, firing solutions calculated. The aircraft doesn't just carry weapons, it thinks about how to use them. One pilot, one seat. Because the machine now does what the RIO used to do, and faster, and with more information, and without fatigue, and without fear. That's the trade. The F-35 pilot is not managing the aircraft in the way the F-14 crew managed theirs. They are directing it, supervising it. The instinct, the feel, the relationship between human and machine that F-14 pilots describe, that is not what the F-35 was built for. It was built to win, quietly, invisibly, without being seen, without being known, without the adversary ever having the chance to feel anything at all. The ghost doesn't want you to be afraid of it. It wants you to be dead before you know it exists. Here is the uncomfortable truth that lives between these two aircraft. The F-14 was retired in 2006, not because it was obsolete, not because it had failed. It was retired because it was expensive to maintain, because the Cold War threat it was designed for no longer existed, and because the Navy needed to consolidate around a single platform. The decision made sense on paper, but something left with it that the specifications never captured. The F-14 was the last American aircraft that a civilian could immediately understand. You didn't need to know anything about radar cross-sections or sensor fusion or low-absorption coatings. You saw the variable sweep wings, the twin tails, the sheer size of it, and you understood that machine was built to dominate. Top Gun didn't make the F-14 iconic because Hollywood needed a cool plane. Hollywood chose the F-14 because the F-14 was already iconic, because it looked like what a fighter was supposed to look like, because it carried its power on the outside, where everyone could see it. The F-35 carries its power inside, in its software, in its sensor architecture, in the invisible geometry of its stealth profile. It is, by almost every measurable metric, a more capable aircraft than the F-14 in the threat environments it was designed for. And almost nobody loves it. This is not a trivial observation. It matters because the relationship between a nation and its military is partly emotional, partly symbolic, partly about what the machines represent beyond their technical capabilities. The F-14 told a story about America that Americans wanted to believe, that American power was visible, physical, overwhelming, that it showed up on your wingtip and made you understand without words. The F-35 tells a different story, one about invisible dominance, algorithmic warfare, the replacement of human judgment with machine processing. It is probably the correct story for the war that is actually coming, but it's a lonelier story. And here is the question that nobody in the Pentagon's budget committee ever had to answer. When you retired the last aircraft that a generation grew up believing in, when you replace the Hunter with the Ghost, do you lose something in the culture of the people who fly them, in the belief system of the nation that builds them? The F-14 pilots who flew from carrier decks in the Indian Ocean, who appeared on Soviet wingtips and delivered a message without words, those pilots knew what they were. They knew what they represented. They felt it in the aircraft beneath them. What does an F-35 pilot feel flying alone, invisible, undetected, winning a war that the enemy doesn't even know is happening? The answer is probably effective. But effective and irreplaceable are not the same thing.